So we're back with Unconditional Surrender, the great World War II in Europe, and it's the start of June 1940, and Germany have just declared war on France, so that will be interesting this turn. In May, the Germans went to war with Denmark, Holland, Belgium and Norway all at once. Now Denmark was easily conquered. They had one very weak unit which was just swept aside up here, and the Germans took Aalborg up there, where you can see the Luftwaffe unit there. On Aalborg, something about, let's see if it'll focus, there we go, and then took Oslo. I'm just thinking about that invasion of Oslo in retrospect. It cost the Germans a surface action marker, which they'll get back in July for free. It cost them an airdrop marker, which they won't get back until October, which is very powerful. And it cost them a surprise attack marker, which cost 20 production to rebuild. And it cost them 3 sorties by that Luftwaffe unit there, and a sortie by a convoy unit, which is under that stack there in Oslo, and to recover 3 sorties from the aircraft is 6 production, and a sortie from the convoy is 4 production, so 10 production just there, 20 for the surprise attack marker, plus a power drop, plus a surface action, just to take Norway. And you know, Norway's a very nice place in that, no doubt, but all those resources, really, I think they could probably have been better spent, and I'm kind of regretting the Germans just blowing them on taking Norway simply because, you know, historically they went and took Norway. Perhaps should have thought a little bit more carefully than that. But there it is. They've done it now. I'm not going to reverse it all. I mean, and so they plough on, and we'll see whether they can be a little bit more efficient in taking Paris. I've ended up here with the camera focused on the Belgian army, which did an absolutely magical job last turn of staying alive. It seemed to resist all German efforts to kill it. You can see the Germans' 2 Panzer tank units, which are incredibly tough in this game, tank armoured units like that, just +2s on the dice rolls just for being armoured, which is a big deal in this system. Well, the Belgians resisted, and the last attack that they suffered forced them to retreat, and they couldn't retreat. They're in Brussels, but you can see they're hemmed in by French units. They can't retreat across the border anyway, and even if they could, they can't, because they'd be overstacked. So they took a step loss and were reduced. But then in the production phase, I had the joy of spending the Belgians 1 point of production to rebuild their army in Brussels back up to full strength, which I found, well, quite amusing on behalf of the Western Allies, at least. So the Belgians have hung in for a turn, and now it's the French's turn to try and emulate them for a while. So while I remember, I'd just like to say a thanks to the designer who he watched the first video on this that I posted on Board Game Geek and dropped a comment in, just to tell me that I was making a bit of an error with the rules. The Germans didn't have enough units to satisfy a certain condition. They have to keep the east side of eastern Germany, Poland, East Prussia, that area, garrisoned reasonably well, and I didn't have enough units over there doing it. So thank you very much for that. That's fab. That's pretty awesome. To spot it with my camera work, and B, to bring it up. So that's really cool. And that being caught has meant that this action down here, the invasion of France by Germany, which just happened, we're in June 1940 here, and as you can see, the Germans have ripped into France here, pretty much decimated the French line. The British Expeditionary Forces there in Calais, sort of surrounded there, and there's German armour. With their support, that German armour is just unstoppable. The Germans went in initially with, I think, with that 2 Panzer there, and the French threw up air to try and compete, and the Germans allowed this for 2 or 3 battles, just to soak up sorties out of the French air, and then used a fresh Luftwaffe unit over here and just bombed these airfields into the ground, so that the French Air Force could no longer take off. And then this 1 Panzer there in the middle of the shot there just rampaged with uninterrupted air support all through this area, cleaning stuff out, and then the infantry followed in. It really was pretty effective. And again, I played this scenario as a training scenario, the invasion of France, and done okay. I mean, the Germans successfully conquered France in the 4 turns or 5 turns the game that scenario gives you. But here, I mean, man, they just wasted the French, absolutely devastated them, much more effectively than I managed to in the training scenario. Just seem to have learnt a little bit about how to work the system a little bit better, and yeah, the French are in just disarray here. They might last will they last through July? No, they won't. I don't think so. They've got 12 National Will left, and I have absolutely no idea how. I mean, they just can't. I mean, even if the Germans couldn't be bothered to take Paris, they'll probably just run amok, grabbing cities at will. I mean, the Germans will take Paris. They'll just surround it and blast it, and then just cruise down through France, grabbing whatever they like to knock the National Will down to 0. Yeah, it's all over for the French, I'm afraid. But the only slight possibility is if the British Expeditionary Force here can do something. They have that air unit, absolutely fresh, clean, unused air unit as backup, and the Luftwaffe is spent. The Luftwaffe is down, finished, and I mean, the Germans probably wouldn't want to throw an air unit with 5 sorties up against it anyway. So yeah, if that British Expeditionary Force can do a little something, I mean, potential there that 4th Army, does he have somewhere to retreat to? Yeah, oh yeah, he does. He could. No, he doesn't. That's an enemy zone of control. So actually, that German 4th Army there, you can see if it had to retreat, it couldn't retreat into Paris. It couldn't retreat onto the railway line junction, because that's in an enemy zone of control of the French 10th Army, and it couldn't retreat across the Somme, because that's also an enemy zone of control of the 10th Army. So it's in something of a precarious spot there. Let's have a go at that with the British and see what we can do. Just going into the operations phase of July 41, sorry, 41, July 40, and the British counterattack there produced absolutely no effect whatsoever, and the French have tried to shuffle around a few units to create some sort of speed bumps for the Germans. I really don't think it's going to achieve very much, though. The only bright side for the French is that the Germans, you can only reorganise your air units, recover 2 sorties for each air unit, and so the Germans are very limited on air power. It's probably enough. They can probably stomp through enough French to cause a French surrender, but it's possible, it's just possible, if the rolls go really, really badly for the Germans, I suppose they could be halted for a turn, and that would be interesting because the French have got a lot of eliminated units that went back that are now waiting to be rebuilt there, and if the French could survive long enough to rebuild them and repopulate some of France, that might prolong the agony, but it's a long shot. We'll see. Well, that's it. Where are we? July 1940, and France has collapsed, fallen, surrendered, whatever it's called. It's not collapsed, it's anyway, they're out of the game. I've taken all the French units off the board. The Germans just steamrolled through all the gaps. It was frightening. Just powered through, killed a couple more units, and then just started mopping up cities, just rolling along communication lines and capturing cities. I need to perhaps mark up the cities that they didn't capture, because those are technically not German for sort of supply purposes and so on. But I really think, honestly, it's a bit of irrelevant bookkeeping. I'm not even sure I can be bothered to have Allied control markers sat around on, Dijon and Bordeaux and Brest out there, and Cherbourg, simply for the sake of it. Seems a bit silly. Anyway, that's France gone, and that means that the attention is now going to shift somewhat over here to the Eastern Front. I might even move the camera around over there, perhaps, and also down into the Mediterranean, where it has to be said, I've just been trying to get my head around when you're doing sort of land stuff, and it's things like supply are very straightforward in this game. Trace along, trace 2 hexes, trace to a rail line, trace back to your home country, pretty straightforward. But once you start looking at some of these places over here, now there are some rules just to make things simple so that you don't have to faff around. So if you're a garrison unit on an island in a port, you're automatically in supply. So in Malta, inside that fort, there's a British garrison unit, and we don't have to mess around supplying that. However, further over there somewhere, there we go, there is a Oh, that's not very well focused, is it? Yeah, so over there you can see a stack, and that closest stack has got a British convoy unit, a British Mediterranean fleet in it, and a British army in it. And suddenly you have to think, how on earth are these getting supplies? And you have to start paying sorties with units to get them into supply, and then obviously you have to be paying to get those sorties back off again. And similarly, you know, here, and there's a fort there in Tobruk, and I'm looking at it saying, how on earth is that unit being supplied? And as far as I can tell, for a while it was purely in low supply, because it could trace back to Benghazi there. I've moved a convoy down into Tripoli there, and it can actually trace supply all along the coast to that convoy, and then that convoy can trace supply back over to Sicily or mainland Italy. But you know, you really do have to wonder what you're doing, and it gets a lot more. There's a certain puzzle element. Now, I'm sure that when I get around to something like OCS, the supply in it is going to blow my brains compared to this, where it is relatively straightforward. But still, there's an interesting sort of puzzle, jigsaw puzzle of supply lines and convoys and paths across this Mediterranean zone, and I'm wondering what the hell, how I'm sure it feels like there should be a way to exploit it, and I just can't quite see how, and maybe I just have to just throw caution to the wind, and perhaps I think the British, because they've actually got a full strength army down over here in Alexandria, I have to work out how it's going to. Well, I know how it's being supplied by those convoys and back through the Suez Canal and out over into the ocean. I think it's the Arabian Ocean over there. It's one of those boxes over there. If you can get to supply to one, you can get to the other. So that's how they are getting supplied, and they reckon that they can come along here and put the hurt on Tobruk. And the other reason they think that is because another thing I just noticed, and you know, I am new to the game, so I make no apologies for this, but I kept looking at the combat table thinking, what on earth is a carrier unit? What do they look like? I don't remember seeing one. And if I come down here to Gibraltar, and I'm sorry it's upside down, but that unit there, Force H, with the planes on it, that should have been alerting me, had I been awake at any point during the play of this game, that should have been alerting me to the fact that there might be an aircraft carrier in there. But it took a little while for me to look it up. Anyway, so knowing now that we've got some mobile air power in the Mediterranean for the British, and the fact that there's an army sat, way over there in wherever it is, in Alexandria, it's starting to make me want to exercise some force with the British in the Mediterranean and see what can be done about, maybe trying to get at the Italians a bit. But the Italians as well, they only have 12 national will. The British only have 20, but 12 national will, and you think there's got to be a way to chisel away at some of that. Just by defeating ground units, winning a few battles, maybe invading, roads, or we shall see.